Did you know that 33 million teen vapors globally think that because e-cigarettes don't cause cancer, like conventional cigarettes, they must be all good? By conveying the hazards of nicotine vaping as 5-minute short stories or microlearning, and spoken in the simplest language possible, Safeguard is by youth, for youth, and in the language of youth. Teen Vaping Awareness Mission. So, what are you waiting for? Listen, learn, quit.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Teen Vaping Awareness Microlearning platform Safeguard, where I seek to take the complex science of adolescent vaping and simplify it down to a teen-appropriate level. So today we're going to touch on the third letter of the Safeguard acronym, the F, which stands for the fatal health effects of vaping, where we'll understand how a teenager's body reacts to nicotine vapors, and specifically study its impact on key organ systems like the lungs, brain, and immune system. And this is one of the more biology-heavy, dense of our 9 microlearning videos. As usual, I'll simplify it down as much as possible over the course of the video, but this one may definitely go over our 5 to 7 minute mark that these videos will typically be at, but this is a one-time thing. So now, moving into our content. So, as we discussed in story 1, 400 years had passed since the first time the addictive nature and medical effects of smoking were published, as we discussed when we did that timeline of the chronology of research surrounding smoking and vaping, but conversely only 14 years have passed since 2012, when Caponetto et al. Published the first paper on the addictive nature of nicotine vaping. And due to the fact that only 12 years have passed, only short-term effects of vaping are currently known, specifically focusing on 3 systems, which we'll discuss today: the nervous system and the alteration of brain chemistry, the respiratory system, impairing breathing, and the immune system, impairing both antiviral and antibacterial immunity, aka our ability to fight off pathogens. It also impairs other systems like the endocrine and cardiovascular systems, but unfortunately we don't have the time to touch on those today. So starting off with the nervous system, the effect of vaping on the nervous system has to do with the cycle of addiction itself and how we get addicted in the first place to vaping. This is connected to the reward pathway, which is a system of organs in the nervous system. Starting off with the nicotine that enters our brain through the blood-brain barrier, it crosses the blood-brain barrier after we inhale some puffs of the vape device. This nicotine then enters the brain within seconds, and the green-shaped Ys here, the nicotine receptors, are immediately ready to bind to the nicotine themselves. These nicotine receptors then send a signal, represented by these dotted arrows, to the ventral tegmental area, or the VTA, which produces dopamine. And dopamine, you can see it represented in these blue dots, and it is the feel-good neurotransmitter. It's sort of what allows us to feel good, not just after vaping, but after a lot of other things like sexual activity, after consuming caffeine, good food, etc. And it produces dopamine in the VTA. After we puff the vape, within seconds, it's producing this dopamine. And now it goes through a variety of other organs within the reward pathway, such as the amygdala, which processes emotions, sort of allowing us to channel that we enjoyed this sensation of puffing the vape device. Then into the hippocampus, which allows us to form memories, telling us, let me remember that stimulus that made me happy so we can repeat it. The prefrontal cortex, which coordinates attention and planning, saying, let's focus on this activity because it's important. And lastly, the nucleus accumbens, or the NA, which coordinates motor function, sort of telling us, let me tell my hands to take another puff, sort of sending that signal from the brain back to the hands to puff the vaping device once more, hence starting the vicious cycle of addiction. So now moving into the effect of teen vaping on the respiratory system. So we discussed in story 1 as well that purified microparticles of nicotine, which are found in vape devices, go much deeper into the lungs than those larger crude particles that you typically find in a conventional cigarette. And you can see a depiction of that here, that the larger particles stay at the top of the lungs, whereas the smaller micro-sized particles go down to the bottom. And this is part of what makes vaping so harmful in the first place. And you can see here another graphic that we showed you in story 1 as well, having to do with the chemicals and specifically the bronchial irritants, or the respiratory irritants, that are involved in the vaping devices, and the additional ones that are created from heating the e-cigarettes themselves. And this can lead to many things. First and foremost, it can lead to popcorn lung. And you can see that the sort of depositions here very much resemble popcorn visually. And beyond that, they actually contain the exact same sort of chemicals as popcorn, as it has to do with the deposition of diacetyl flavoring here. And this is the same flavoring that's used in trace amounts in popcorn. So diacetyl, along with other bronchial irritants, come into the lungs when we have popcorn lung, and this causes scar tissue formation, which eventually causes the air sacs of the lung, as you can see here in red, the alveoli, to get blocked or occluded, preventing the normal transfer of air. And from bad to worse, bronchitis, emphysema, and COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, can ensue from this process, leading to a grave set of atrocities surrounding the respiratory system that can stem from teen vaping, or vaping more generally. Now moving into the effects of the immune system. So simply put, vaping harms both antibacterial and antiviral immunity, and in the context of the immune system, this means that research has demonstrated that during COVID, or during the height of the COVID pandemic, teen e-cigarette users were 5 times more likely to get COVID than teen non-vapers. And this is because of what we'll discuss right now. So the immune system, to backtrack, can be broken down into 2 components: the innate and adaptive immune system. So the innate immune system, as its name might suggest, is always present within us and starts immediately upon us being infected, within hours, and it's a one-size-fits-all approach, and hence is not sort of customized from pathogen to pathogen. And the neutrophil is the main player in the innate immune system. It engulfs bacteria and forms what's called a net around those bacteria, hence engulfing and eating and eventually killing that pathogen, preventing bacterial infection. Nicotine inhibits these neutrophils and hence greatly increases our susceptibility to bacterial infections. On the adaptive immune system side, the adaptive immune system is a much slower response. Once again, as the name might suggest to you, it's a slower response. It requires days to launch. However, it is custom made. It's tailor made to the pathogen itself. And it also has a memory, meaning that the next time that same pathogen can attack the adaptive immune system, and specifically the B and T lymphocytes, or the B and T white blood cells in the adaptive immune system, can defend and improve themselves to be much more efficient the next time that that pathogen attacks. However, just like it inhibits neutrophils, nicotine also damages both T cell and B cell activity, hence decreasing our ability to fight off both bacteria and viruses if you combine the innate and adaptive immune system, hence leading to this assertion up top that during COVID, teen e-cigarette users were much more likely to get COVID than people who didn't vape, and this would obviously be true of not just COVID, but a variety of other bacterial and viral diseases. So combining these 3 systems, vaping leads to a very vicious cycle of self-destruction. So e-cigarette smoking is the first step, obviously. We vape the e-cigarette. Then this leads to, within 10 seconds, the nicotine immediately entering our brain, crossing the blood-brain barrier. This then leads to the release of dopamine, signaling a sense of pleasure. This then leads to a short-lived restlessness, and hence an increase of blood pressure. Through the reward pathway, we're then inclined to use the e-cigarette device again, leading to popcorn lung, or the accumulation of flavoring such as diacetyl in the lung, eventually leading to bronchitis and emphysema, and eventually COPD, eventually leading to nicotine impacting both innate and adaptive immunity, as we just discussed, leading to pathogens not being able to be cleared, which eventually leads to COPD not being able to get better. This eventually leads to hormonal imbalance, which causes both stress and sleeplessness as a result. So these systems that we've discussed today, the immune, respiratory, and nervous systems, obviously cannot simply be discussed in isolation. When you intermesh the 3, you realize just how vicious the atrocities that vaping can cause actually are, as you can see in this graphic. So moving into our usual learning objectives quiz to conclude the micro-learning video, here are the 5 questions that I ask. Why is only short-term health info available for e-cigarettes? What's the human body system that reacts the fastest to vaping? What's the reward pathway's role in the nervous system? What is popcorn lung in the respiratory system? And why in the pandemic did teen vapors contract COVID at a rate 5 times more frequent than other non-vapors? So I'll give you 15 or 20 seconds or more, as usual, to pause the video and answer these questions. Make a note of what those answers are, and we'll check back in a minute to review the answers. Okay, so I hope you've all had the opportunity to pause the video and, as usual, tackle these 5 questions. Now we'll move into their answers. So as you can see here, the answers to these 5 questions are marked in pink. You can see these 5 answers over here. And as usual, if you got 3 out of the 5 questions right, thank you so much for tuning on with me, and I'll see you in story number 4. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.